The Earth had long been a cradle of human ingenuity, a planet teeming with boundless potential. But the future of humanity was always uncertain. For centuries, humanity had looked up at the stars, wondering what lay beyond the night sky. The idea of interstellar travel had been a dream, an aspiration for the brightest minds. Yet, no one truly believed that such a dream could become a reality. That was until an unprecedented event shattered everything. It began with a signal, a faint, cryptic message from a distant star system, located light-years away from Earth. The signal was a series of repeating pulses, patterns too complex to be naturally occurring. At first, many dismissed it as an anomaly. But the scientific community quickly recognized the potential significance. The message was not just random noise, it was intentional. The first extraterrestrial communication in human history. The world was thrown into chaos. Governments, corporations, and scientific organizations scrambled to decipher the message. A global summit was called, with the most brilliant minds in the world coming together to understand what humanity was facing. Amid the frenzy, there was only one truth: humanity had been found. And it wasn't just by any alien species, it was by an ancient galactic civilization known as the Zenthari. The Zenthari were no ordinary race. They had evolved over millennia and spanned across galaxies. They were advanced beyond anything Earth's scientists could comprehend. Their technology was so far ahead that it seemed like magic. The Zenthari had encountered many species over their vast existence, but the message they sent to Earth was different. It wasn't a warning or an invitation. It was a test. At first, humanity did not know how to respond. The news was both exhilarating and terrifying. The idea of being part of a galactic community was thrilling, but the unknown consequences of such an interaction weighed heavily on the world. Would humanity be prepared to take its place among the stars, or would it fall into chaos, outmatched by beings far superior? Amid the uncertainty, a young scientist named Dr. Elena Marlowe rose to the forefront. Her groundbreaking research in quantum mechanics had already earned her a reputation as one of the leading thinkers of her generation. Elena quickly became the face of the human response to the Zenthari message. She was tasked with leading the team that would decode the final segment of the signal, a key to unlocking the next stage of communication. As Elena worked tirelessly, she discovered something shocking. The Zenthari were not simply reaching out to test humanity's intelligence or technological prowess. They were testing something much deeper: humanity's potential for greatness. The signal revealed that the Zenthari had long been observing Earth, tracking the progress of human civilization. And despite humanity's many flaws, wars, greed, environmental degradation, there was something uniquely resilient about humans. They possessed an innate drive to overcome adversity, an unyielding spirit that made them stand out in the galaxy. For the first time, Elena realized that the Zenthari's message was an invitation, but not one to be taken lightly. Humanity was being called upon to prove itself worthy of ascension, to step beyond its planet and join a community of advanced civilizations. The test was not simply about technology or knowledge, it was about understanding the true essence of humanity's soul. As Elena worked with her team, they made a breakthrough that would change everything. The final sequence of the signal revealed the existence of a hidden star gate located in a remote part of the solar system. The gate was a relic from a time long before humanity had even developed civilization. The Zenthari had left it behind as a marker, a bridge to the stars, waiting for the right species to unlock it. And now, that moment had arrived. But there was a catch. The gate could only be activated by a select few, the ones who would become the leaders of humanity's journey. Elena was one of them. She was chosen to be the first to step through the gate, to represent all of humanity in the greatest trial of their existence. As the world watched, Elena stood before the gate, a symbol of humanity's potential. With a deep breath, she pressed her hand to the ancient mechanism, feeling the pulse of energy that surged through her body. The gate hummed to life, and the journey of 1,000 lifetimes began. The next step in humanity's evolution had begun. And it was up to Elena and those who would follow her to ensure that humanity would rise to the occasion. The stars were no longer a distant dream, they were within reach, and humanity's legacy was about to be rewritten. The moment the gate activated, the world fell silent. The bright blue light of the ancient portal illuminated the darkened room, casting shadows that stretched across the floor like fingers reaching into the unknown. Elena Marlowe's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing with questions she had never considered. What would happen next? What awaited her on the other side? She stepped forward, her movements cautious but resolute. The air around her crackled with energy as she crossed the threshold of the Star Gate. The instant her foot passed through, she felt a strange sensation, a rush, like being pulled through time and space itself. The world around her blurred, and the familiar comfort of Earth seemed to dissolve, replaced by an overwhelming sense of vastness and infinity. Elena stumbled as the portal spat her out into the unknown, her feet landing on solid ground. She quickly regained her balance and looked around, her breath catching in her throat. She was no longer in a laboratory or a conference hall. The world around her was a cosmic landscape, the stars burning bright overhead, far more vivid than they had ever appeared from Earth. In the distance, massive structures loomed, monolithic structures that defied all known architectural laws. Floating cities, impossibly large ships, and machines of a scale that seemed almost mythical filled her field of vision. "Welcome, Earthling," a voice boomed, deep and resonant, yet strangely calm. Elena whirled to find a tall figure standing before her, its features hard to define in the dim light, but the presence of the being unmistakable. It radiated an energy unlike anything she had ever felt before, both alien and familiar at the same time. The figure, with its skin shimmering like liquid metal, stepped closer. "I am Mylrak, a member of the Zenthari, and you stand on the threshold of the Ascension path." Elena took a breath, trying to steady her racing thoughts. I didn't expect to be the first one here," she admitted, her voice shaky. "Where are we? What is this place?" Mylrak's voice carried an air of ancient wisdom. "You are on the Zenthari homeworld, the central nexus of the galactic civilizations. This is the proving ground, the place where all who would ascend must undergo trials not of mind or technology, but of heart, will, and spirit." The weight of Mylrak's words sank deep into Elena's chest. The Zenthari were watching. The ancient civilization had been observing humanity for centuries, and now, Elena was the first human to step onto their sacred ground. The magnitude of her presence here was overwhelming. But it wasn't just about her. It was about the future of her people, the survival of humanity itself. "What do I have to do?" Elena asked, her voice steadying as the urgency within her grew. Mylrak's gaze softened. "You are but one. There are others who will follow, but you must be the guide. This is not merely a test of your own strength, but the strength of all humankind. You will be tested on every level. Your heart, your mind, your ability to lead and to sacrifice." Before she could ask more, the ground beneath her feet shifted, and a dazzling light filled the sky. Figures began to emerge from the darkness, tall, glowing beings whose forms flickered with shifting patterns of light. Their presence was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The Zenthari were far more than just an advanced race, they were the architects of this vast, intergalactic society. "You will meet others who have also passed their trials," Mylrak continued. "But you are not yet ready. The path you walk will test your very soul, Elena Marlowe. And only through your choices will humanity's future be determined." As Elena absorbed the gravity of Mylrak's words, a low rumble shook the ground beneath her. From above, the colossal silhouette of an enormous ship descended toward them. The ship, a behemoth of metal and energy, bore the insignia of the Zenthari civilization. It was clear, this was no ordinary transport. The ship landed softly on the surface, and a hatch opened, revealing a platform that extended toward Elena. She instinctively stepped forward, but her feet felt heavy, as though she were stepping into the unknown. As she ascended onto the ship, Mylrak joined her, and the ship's doors closed behind them. The interior was nothing like she had ever seen: sleek, metallic walls adorned with incomprehensible symbols, technology that hummed with an energy that seemed almost alive. "You will not be alone in this journey," Mylrak said, his voice reverberating through the ship. Your trials are shared, but they are yours to endure. And the choices you make will shape not only the fate of your species but the very fabric of the galaxy itself. The ship soared into the stars, leaving Earth and its troubles behind. Elena looked out the viewports, the glowing expanse of space stretching before her. She had only just begun to comprehend the scale of what humanity was about to face. And for the first time, she realized that the test was not just about ascending beyond Earth, it was about ascending beyond what humanity had ever known of itself. The ship glided effortlessly through the void, its sleek hull cutting through the stars like a blade. Elena stood at one of the viewing ports, her gaze lost in the infinite stretch of space before her. The stars, once familiar and comforting, now seemed distant, cold. She could almost feel the weight of the universe pressing down on her. What was awaiting her on the other side of this journey? The unknown loomed large, and yet, despite the uncertainty, she knew she had no choice but to move forward. Emwailrak's voice broke through her thoughts. The trials begin soon, Elena Marlowe. You will face what is within you, as well as the challenges that lie ahead. These trials will test the very core of your being. Elena nodded, still unsure of what those words truly meant. She had been briefed on the nature of the trials. The Zenthari had promised they would be unlike anything humanity had encountered before. They weren't physical battles or puzzles to solve, they would strike at the heart of human nature itself: love, loyalty, fear, sacrifice. As the ship continued its journey, the first trial began to take shape. It was a voice that came to her, soft and intimate, pulling her back into the depths of her mind. Elena, the whisper was so familiar, it took her a moment to recognize it. Elena, can you hear me? Her breath caught in her throat. It was the voice of her younger brother, Lucas. The brother she had lost years ago, to a tragic accident that had shattered her family and haunted her every day since. She had never fully recovered from the loss, the guilt that gnawed at her for not being able to save him. Lucas, Elena whispered back, her voice trembling. Is it really you? The voice came again, gentle and pleading. I've missed you. It's been so long, Elena. You've moved on with your life, but I never had the chance to say goodbye, Tears welled in Elena's eyes as her heart ached with the familiar pain. No, she whispered to herself. This can't be real. It's a test. It has to be. But the voice continued, and this time, it was more insistent. You were supposed to protect me. Why didn't you, The guilt was overwhelming. The weight of responsibility she had carried for years came crashing down on her again, even though she knew, deep in her soul, that it wasn't her fault. Lucas had been taken from her, but that didn't stop the feeling of failure from rising within her. She gripped the edge of the viewport tightly, fighting to steady her emotions. This was the trial. The Zenthari weren't just testing her mind or intellect, they were testing her heart, the very foundation of who she was. Could she face the deepest wounds of her past without allowing them to break her? You're not real, Elena whispered fiercely, her voice cracking. You're not real. For a moment, there was silence, and then the voice returned, softer, almost sad. I am as real as you need me to be. The question is, can you let go? Can you forgive yourself for the choices you've made, The room seemed to pulse with energy as Elena's heart hammered in her chest. She was being asked to confront her past, to let go of the guilt that had haunted her for so long. It wasn't a test of strength or intelligence, but of emotional endurance. Of accepting what had happened, even if she could never change it. With a slow, shuddering breath, Elena made a decision. I forgive myself, she said, the words coming from somewhere deep inside her, a quiet but powerful truth. I did everything I could, and it wasn't enough, but I can't live in the past anymore. As soon as she spoke those words, the voice of Lucas faded away, and a weight seemed to lift from her chest. The stars outside the viewport shifted, the scene around her changing as if the universe itself was acknowledging her release from the past. Emwailrak appeared beside her, his expression unreadable. You have passed the first trial. You have faced your own heart and emerged stronger for it. Elena nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She had faced her grief head-on, confronted the darkest parts of herself, and emerged on the other side with a new understanding. But there was no time to linger on the victory. The next trial was already waiting. Before her mind could settle, the ship jolted as it entered a new sector of space. The stars outside turned a deep, unnatural red, and the ship's systems hummed with an eerie energy. The trial of the mind was about to begin. A series of lights flashed in front of Elena's eyes, and suddenly, she was no longer standing in the ship. She found herself standing in a vast, empty void, a storm of shifting thoughts and swirling ideas surrounding her. Her mind was overwhelmed by an endless barrage of questions, each more complex and abstract than the last. Philosophical quandaries, impossible mathematical equations, riddles that seemed to have no answer, all of them pressed in on her at once. But there was no panic. No fear. This was the trial of intellect. The Zenthari sought to understand how human minds would react to the vast, incomprehensible concepts that existed beyond Earth. How would Elena navigate this storm of uncertainty? Closing her eyes, she breathed deeply, focusing on the one thing she knew she could control, her own thoughts. Slowly, the chaotic maelstrom of ideas began to slow, each question fading into the background. She knew there was no single answer to everything. There were no easy solutions to the complexities of the universe. The key was to accept the unknown, to seek understanding, not in certainty, but in the process of exploration. With that realization, the storm around her cleared, and Elena found herself back on the ship, breathless but steady. Mylrak looked at her, his eyes gleaming with something resembling approval. You have passed the second trial. You have proven the strength of your mind and your willingness to embrace uncertainty. Elena exhaled deeply, her mind still racing with the implications of what had just happened. The trials had only just begun, but already, they were shaping her in ways she hadn't imagined. The journey ahead would only get harder, but one thing was certain, she would face it, no matter what. The trials had been grueling, and Elena was beginning to feel the weight of her mission. The initial shock of stepping into the vast unknown had worn off, replaced by the steady pressure of what was to come. She was no longer just representing herself, she was representing humanity. Every choice she made from this point on could change the course of their future. The weight of that responsibility was heavy on her shoulders, but she couldn't allow it to break her. The ship hummed steadily as it traveled through the void, and Elena found herself standing once again before Mylrak, who had become her constant guide through this strange new world. His presence was both reassuring and unsettling, his alien nature an ever-present reminder of how small and fragile humanity seemed in the grand scheme of the galaxy. You have passed the trials of heart and mind, Mylrak began, his voice calm, but with an undercurrent of something more serious. Now, we will see if you are worthy of leading your people into the stars. Elena's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? She asked, her voice suddenly sharp. I thought the trials were over. Mylrak gave a slight nod. The trials are never truly over. But now, we turn our focus to the trial of leadership. Your greatest challenge will not come from the outside, but from within. You must choose whether to lead with compassion or with cold strategy. To be a ruler of the heart or of the mind. The decision you make will shape the future of all those who follow. The ship slowed as it neared an unfamiliar planet, one that didn't appear on any star maps, its surface covered with vast, shimmering cities and green fields that stretched endlessly across the landscape. The sky above glowed with an otherworldly hue, as if the very atmosphere was alive with energy. This is the planet of Nuvra, Mylrak said as he led her down a narrow corridor towards an airlock. A world whose people were once divided by endless wars. It was a society on the brink of collapse, until the Zenthari arrived and offered them a choice, unite or perish. It was not a decision they made lightly, but they chose unity. They chose peace. And their leaders were tested, just as you will be. Elena followed Mylrak into the airlock, and the doors hissed open, revealing a wide balcony overlooking a city that seemed to pulse with life. But it wasn't the bustling streets or the shining spires that caught Elena's attention, it was the three figures standing before her. Each figure was humanoid in shape, but there was something distinctly alien about them. The first, a tall, regal woman, wore a crown made of intricate silver vines that glowed with an inner light. Her eyes were calm and knowing, but there was a hardness to her expression. The second, a wiry man with sharp, calculating features, stood with his arms crossed, his gaze cold and measuring. The third figure was a child, no older than 10, with wide, innocent eyes that looked up at Elena with a mixture of awe and expectation. "These are the leaders of Nuvra," Mylrak explained. "You will have to choose one to follow. Each has a vision for the future of their people. The woman, Queen Iriath, believes in the strength of unity, the power of compassion, and the idea that a leader must guide their people with a steady, empathetic hand. The man, Yarok, believes that only through strict control and discipline can Nuvra survive. He would rule with absolute authority, relying on strategy and force to maintain order. The child, Lyra, represents the hope for a new generation. She believes that the future of Nuvra lies in the hands of the youth, that a new path must be forged by those who are not bound by the mistakes of the past." Elena felt a knot tighten in her stomach as she faced the three figures. How could she possibly make such a decision? Each leader had their merits, their philosophies, and their supporters. She knew she couldn't simply follow one without understanding the consequences of her choice. And yet, she also understood that her decision here, this trial, was a reflection of the leadership she would need to provide for humanity. She would have to lead them through difficult choices, balancing the needs of the many against the desires of the few. Mylrak stepped aside, allowing Elena to approach the leaders. "Your task is simple, choose one of them to lead Nuvra into the future. But be warned, your choice will have consequences. The path you take will shape not just Nuvra's future, but the way you lead your people. The world you choose will either thrive or fall." Elena stood before the three leaders, her heart heavy. She had always been someone who relied on facts, on logic. But this was different. This was not a problem that could be solved with equations or formulas. This was a test of her soul, a test of her ability to lead with both heart and mind. "I cannot choose," Elena said finally, her voice firm but unsure. "Each of you has something vital to offer. Iriatha's compassion, Jarek's discipline, and Lyra's vision for the future, each one is necessary. But no one person can carry the weight of an entire civilization alone." The three leaders exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Mylrak, who had been watching from the sidelines, nodded approvingly. "You have passed the trial, Elena Marlowe," he said quietly. "You have chosen not to rely solely on one path, but to understand that the future of Nuvra, and of humanity, requires a balance of all things. Leadership is not about one person making the decisions. It is about understanding the needs of your people and the world they inhabit." The sky above Nuvra shifted, and the air seemed to hum with energy. The trial had not been about choosing the best leader, it had been about understanding the complexity of leadership itself, and how the choices of one can ripple out to affect the whole. Elena felt a sense of clarity she had not known before. With a deep breath, Elena turned away from the leaders, her path forward more certain. The galaxy awaited, and the legacy of humanity, her legacy, was still unfolding. She knew that the decisions ahead would be even harder, but now she felt ready. She had learned that true leadership didn't come from knowing all the answers, it came from the willingness to embrace the unknown and guide others through it. The ship's engines hummed steadily as it glided through the stars, but the peace Elena had felt after passing the leadership trial was short-lived. As the ship veered off its planned course, a deep, unsettling silence took over the vessel. The soft hum of the engines was replaced by a low vibration, and the lights within the ship dimmed slightly. Elena's stomach churned as she sensed the shift, the calm before the storm. Mylrak's voice broke the silence. "The next trial is one of great personal sacrifice. You must face the darkness within and decide whether you will rise above it, or be consumed by it." Elena's brow furrowed. The trial so far had been difficult, but this felt different. "What do you mean, consumed by it?" she asked, her voice tense. "What's coming?" Mylrak was quiet for a moment before he responded. The trial of darkness is not an external force. It is a mirror, one that will show you the deepest, most terrifying aspects of your own being. Your greatest fear. Your deepest regrets. The part of you that you have buried and denied. It is a test of resilience. Only by confronting and overcoming this darkness can you prove that you are ready for what lies ahead. Before Elena could ask more, the ship shuddered violently. A deep, guttural sound reverberated through the walls, as if something large and hostile was approaching. The viewport ahead flickered and changed, the once peaceful stars outside now swirling in ominous patterns. The colors of the universe darkened, as if a shadow had fallen across the very fabric of space itself. The ship lurched again, and then, with an unsettling finality, it came to a halt. The engine sputtered, and everything went black. Elena. The voice was soft at first, distant, but as the darkness enveloped her, it grew louder, closer. It was Lucas. Her brother. Her heart skipped in her chest. She had thought the trials were behind her, that she had conquered her grief. But the darkness was drawing her back in, and with it came the haunting memories she had worked so hard to bury. "Why did you leave me?" the voice whispered, low and sorrowful. "Why didn't you save me?" A cold sweat broke out across Elena's forehead. She wanted to scream, to shut out the voice, but the words rang in her ears, echoing in the emptiness. It was a question she had never been able to answer. The guilt of not being able to save Lucas had plagued her for years, and now it seemed to have manifested into this oppressive darkness that threatened to overwhelm her once again. She clutched her head, trying to block out the sound, but it only grew louder, more insistent. The room around her shifted, the walls closing in, distorting her surroundings. The ship was gone. The trial was taking form in her mind, and she was trapped within it. "Why did you let me die?" the voice wailed, the sorrow and pain in it so real, so raw, that Elena felt as though her heart was being ripped from her chest. "You said you would protect me. But you failed me." The darkness seemed to pulse around her, closing in tighter, suffocating her. Elena dropped to her knees, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The words continued to echo, a never-ending torrent of guilt, shame, and pain. Her brother's voice, the pain in it, was unbearable. "This isn't real," Elena thought desperately. This is the trial. This is not Lucas. This is the darkness within me, and I must face it, But even as she told herself that, the weight of the guilt was crushing her. The part of her that had never forgiven herself, that had blamed herself for Lucas's death, was rising to the surface once more. The trial was showing her just how deep her wounds went, and how much they still controlled her. "I couldn't protect you," Elena whispered through clenched teeth, her voice cracking. "I couldn't save you." The darkness around her seemed to pause, the silence deafening for a brief moment. And then, something shifted. A figure appeared before her, bathed in a soft, golden light that cut through the shadows. It was Lucas, his form ghostly, yet undeniably real. His face was calm, peaceful even, as if he had been freed from the pain that had gripped him in life. "You were not to blame, Elena," the figure of Lucas said gently. "You did everything you could. I am not angry. I never was." Elena's heart caught in her throat as she looked at him, the words reverberating through her soul. "I am not angry." She had spent so many years believing that she had failed him, but here, in this trial, Lucas was telling her the truth, she wasn't to blame. The darkness seemed to recede as the light from his form expanded, pushing back the shadows. The oppressive weight that had pressed on her chest began to lift, and Elena stood slowly, taking a deep breath. The voice of Lucas faded, but the clarity of the moment lingered. "I forgive myself," she said, her voice steady now, filled with a newfound strength. "I couldn't control everything. But I did my best." With those words, the darkness fully receded, and the ship's systems powered back on. The lights flickered to life, and the stars outside returned to their peaceful, shimmering state. The trial had ended, and Elena felt a deep sense of release. Mylrak appeared before her once more, his expression unreadable. You have passed the trial of darkness. You have faced your deepest fears and regrets, and you have chosen to let them go. Elena nodded slowly, her body still trembling from the intensity of the experience. It wasn't just the darkness, she said quietly. It was the guilt. The need to be perfect. I thought I could have done more. But I can't live like that anymore. Mylrak regarded her with a quiet intensity. And so you have learned that the greatest strength lies not in avoiding the darkness, but in facing it, and choosing to rise above it. The trial was over, but Elena knew this would not be the last time she would be forced to confront her own demons. However, with each trial, she was becoming more than just the person she had been. She was becoming something greater, something capable of leading humanity into the unknown. As the ship moved onward, Elena stared out into the stars once more, ready for whatever lay ahead. Elena stood at the helm of the ship, the stars outside a vast sea of possibilities. The trials, each one more demanding than the last, had shaped her in ways she could never have predicted. She had confronted her deepest fears, questioned the very nature of leadership, and faced the darkness within herself. Each step had brought her closer to understanding what it meant to truly lead, not with perfection, but with resilience, compassion, and courage. Mylrak had been a steady guide, offering cryptic wisdom, but Elena was beginning to understand that the trials were not just tests, they were mirrors, reflecting the essence of humanity. They were teaching her not just to survive, but to thrive in the face of adversity. And now, as the final trial loomed ahead, Elena could sense a shift. Something monumental was about to unfold. The ship's sensors pinged, and a series of holographic displays flickered to life, showing the readings of a nearby system. Elena's eyes narrowed as she studied the data. "This is it, isn't it?" she asked, turning to Mylrak, who had appeared silently by her side. Mylrak's eyes were somber. "Yes. The final trial is not one you face alone, Elena Marlowe. It is the culmination of everything you have learned. It is about the unity of your people, and the fate of the galaxy itself." The ship veered toward a planet in the distance, its surface a patchwork of broken continents and chaotic weather patterns. This was the world of Thalare, a planet whose people had long been divided by conflict and war. It was a world on the brink of extinction, its atmosphere unstable, its resources drained. The Thalare had once been a great civilization, but they had torn themselves apart, unable to come to terms with their differences. And now, they were asking for humanity's help. Elena's pulse quickened as she observed the planet below. There was no turning back now. Her choices, the lessons she had learned, would determine whether the galaxy would be able to unify or whether it would fracture under the weight of division. The communications system came online, and a voice crackled through the ship's speakers. "This is Ambassador Kyra of Thalare," the voice said, distorted by static but still clear enough to make out the urgency in her tone. "We have watched your species, humanity, with great interest. You have passed the trials of the Zenthari, and now we ask for your help. Our planet is dying, and we are on the edge of destruction. We need your technology, your wisdom, your leadership. Can you help us save what's left of our people?" Elena took a deep breath. She had been prepared for this moment, but now that it had arrived, the weight of it settled over her like a shroud. The galaxy was watching, waiting for her to make the impossible decision. Would she unite the people of Thalare with the promise of salvation, or would she risk everything to preserve the fragile peace between the human species and the alien civilizations? She had seen the broken remains of Thalare's cities in the scans. The once gleaming cities now lay in ruin, torn apart by decades of civil war. The people, scattered in factions, were on the verge of annihilation. Their leaders could not agree on a solution. But Elena knew that this was not just about saving a single planet, it was about setting a precedent for the galaxy's future. "Ambassador Kyra," Elena said, her voice steady as she spoke into the comm system. "We are coming to you, but we will need to speak with your leaders. We cannot help a planet if its people cannot find a way to work together. Unity is the key to survival. If you want our help, you must show that you are willing to put aside your differences and work as one. There was a long pause before Kyra responded. We will bring our leaders to the table, as you ask. But I warn you, it will not be easy. The factions on Thalare are entrenched in their beliefs. Many will not be willing to compromise. Elena nodded, her resolve hardening. Then we have no choice but to begin the process. Prepare for our arrival. We'll work together, but we will not give in to division. The ship descended toward the broken world below, its engines cutting through the thick atmosphere as they entered Thalare's orbit. The planet's surface shimmered with an eerie light, the fractured continents a stark reminder of how fragile peace truly was. As the ship landed in the heart of a shattered city, Elena felt the weight of her decision more acutely than ever. She stepped out onto the cracked streets, surrounded by the wreckage of a once thriving civilization. The Thalare people, their bodies a mix of human-like features and alien characteristics, gathered around her. Their eyes were wary, their faces drawn with the burden of years of conflict. She was met by Ambassador Kyra and the leaders of the various factions. The air was thick with tension, the leaders' eyes sharp with distrust. It was clear that they were not united, not in their beliefs, and certainly not in their willingness to trust the humans. Elena Marlowe, Kyra said, her voice cold but not unfriendly, you have arrived, but the question remains, what can you offer that we cannot do ourselves? Elena took a step forward, feeling the weight of the moment settle on her. We can offer you something that has been lost, hope. Not the hope that comes from war, but the hope that comes from unity. You are fractured, but you are not beyond saving. I believe in the potential of this world, and I believe that humanity can help you rebuild. But first, you must unite. The path forward begins with understanding that no one faction can survive alone. The room was silent, the leaders exchanging wary glances. But Elena could see something in their eyes, a flicker of something that resembled hope. It was small, fragile, but it was there. She had spoken the truth. You want us to trust you, one of the leaders, a tall, imposing figure, spoke up. But how can we, when we've been torn apart by centuries of conflict? Elena's voice was steady, but the fire behind her words was undeniable. Because you have no other choice. The galaxy is waiting. Humanity has passed the trials, and we are ready to help, but we will not sacrifice our values. Unity is the only way forward. The choice is yours. But make it quickly, or there will be nothing left to save. The leaders were silent for a long time, their faces grim as they processed her words. It was a gamble, one that Elena was willing to take. She had learned over the course of this journey that the future would not be decided by force or fear, but by the courage to choose unity in the face of adversity. And so, the stage was set. The leaders of Thalare would have to decide whether they would come together for the sake of their future, or let their world slip into oblivion. Elena knew this was just the beginning of the work she would need to do. But for the first time, she felt the weight of leadership not as a burden, but as a privilege. The trials had prepared her for this moment, and now, she would shape the future of the galaxy, one decision at a time. The air in the grand hall of Thalare was thick with tension. The leaders of the fractured planet sat at a long, stone table, their eyes filled with distrust, their bodies rigid with years of battle-hardened defiance. Elena Marlowe stood at the head, her stance unwavering, her voice the only thing keeping the fragile negotiations from shattering into chaos. We stand at the crossroads of history, she said, scanning the room. You may not see it yet, but the choices you make today will determine whether Thalare becomes a beacon of unity, or a cautionary tale of a world that let its divisions destroy it. A gruff leader from the eastern faction scoffed. You speak of unity, human, but you do not know our wars. You do not know the blood we have shed. Elena met his gaze without flinching. No, I don't. But I do know this, we humans have walked this path before. We have torn ourselves apart with war, let hatred and greed push us to the brink of extinction. But we learned. We changed. We stopped seeing borders and factions, and we built something greater than ourselves. That is the path I offer you now. There was silence, save for the distant rumble of the unstable atmosphere outside. For a moment, Elena feared she had lost them. That the centuries of conflict were too deeply rooted to be undone by words. Then Kyra, the ambassador who had first called for help, stood. "The human speaks the truth," she said, her voice firm. "We are a dying world. If we continue to fight amongst ourselves, we will not survive the next generation. But if we choose a new path, if we choose to embrace change, we may yet have a future." Murmurs spread through the hall, some voices rising in agreement, others in opposition. But the seed had been planted. Elena could see it in their eyes. For the first time in generations, the possibility of peace was being considered. She took a breath, pressing forward. "Humanity will help you rebuild, but not as rulers, not as conquerors. As partners. The Galactic Union is already watching, waiting to see if you will take this step. If you do, you won't just survive, you'll thrive. And we will stand beside you as you take your place among the stars." A long silence followed. Then, slowly, one by one, the leaders began to nod. It would not be easy. The scars of war would not fade overnight. But the first step had been taken. And that was how all great legacies began. Weeks passed, and the change was slow, but undeniable. The first United Council of Thalare was formed, with representatives from all factions. Engineers from the Galactic Union arrived, helping to stabilize the planet's failing infrastructure. Cities once left in ruin began to see signs of life again. And at the center of it all, Elena Marlowe stood, watching as history unfolded before her. She had come from Earth as an explorer. She would leave as something more. A leader. A bridge between worlds. A symbol of what humanity could be, not just as conquerors, but as unifiers. As she prepared to leave, Mylrak approached her, his ever-calm gaze filled with something like pride. "You have completed the trials," he said. "But this is only the beginning." Elena smiled, looking up at the stars. "I wouldn't have it any other way." And with that, she stepped onto her ship, ready for whatever came next. Humanity had ascended to the stars. And this was just the beginning of their untold legacy.